The Canon R5C and the Canon C70, two fantastic cameras. But which one should you hire? Let's get into it. Let's start with the Canon R5C, the ultimate hybrid camera. It gives you up to 8K 60p recording, 12-bit internal RAW recording as well, and it gives you two different flavors of RAW. So you've got a standard version and a light version, which gives you options when you want to record RAW footage. That's great. Also, in the video mode, you have all of the same menu options that you would with a typical Canon cine camera, like the C70 or C300, C200. The menus look identical. I look at the R5C like a Swiss Army knife. You can do so many different things, and flexibility is about more than just having a photo and video mode with this camera. It has an EVF. So it means when you're shooting in direct sunlight, you've got the option of using the EVF to compose your images or your video. It has a flip out screen so you can record yourself. So vlogging, for example. It has no IBIS, which means it's great for gimbal work and for FPV drones, because you don't want a sensor inside the camera floating around, because then you get wobbly images on the edge of the frame. You've got amazing digital assist tools as well. Things like false color, you have that in the R5C. You don't need to use an external monitor with either of these cameras. You have all of those digital assists with you. The R5C is compact. It doesn't weigh very much, even though it now has a fan which allows it to do unlimited recording, and there's no overheating issues like you had with the Canon R5. But talking of the Canon R5, when you switch this camera over to its dedicated photo mode, and it is, to all intents and purposes, a Canon R5, it has that proven 45 megapixel sensor inside it with all of those beautiful Canon colors and dual pixel AF. So there are some really cool things in here that make it an interesting camera to pick up. But why would you choose the Canon R5C? What kind of instances would you be using it in that may not be as suitable for the C70? Now, I mentioned the size. It is quite a portable camera, despite the fact that it uses these massive RF lenses. The camera body itself is deceptively lightweight. It takes CF Express cards and it takes SD cards, which means you've got options there. And some people have criticized the battery in this camera because it is quite a hungry camera. It does need a lot of power, especially because it has that fan and the really high resolution recording. But using the older LPE6 batteries is actually, I think, a really big plus for this camera, because even though they may not be as high capacity as the batteries you do get with the C70, the BPA batteries, the LPE6 battery has been around for decades, which means you can go into a camera store virtually anywhere in the world and you can pick up spare batteries for this camera. That is a huge plus. When it comes to audio, Canon has co-developed the Tascam CA-XLR 2D unit that goes on top, which gives you two dedicated XLR inputs, and it doubles up as a TRS input as well. So that is, again, another reason why I think the R5C is great in terms of flexibility. You have options when you want to get professional audio. And I think that's what leads us on to the first instance where I would think renting this camera would be a good idea. Say you were going on a once-in-a-lifetime trip, or you had a project where you weren't too sure what you were going to encounter. This is an ideal camera to take with you because you've got an amazing photo capability in here, but you also have really, really capable video quality as well. Now, who would hire the R5C? First people that come to mind are wildlife shooters, because you've got an amazing stills camera, but also high resolution, super crisp, punchy video footage that you can capture with this camera. And again, like I said, you're traveling all over the world, shooting wildlife, potentially in quite remote locations. Having an LPE6 battery in this camera means you can always pick up spares anywhere you are. And then there's the person that might not even be a professional. Maybe you're just a passionate enthusiast. You want to take a special trip. The camera you have might not cut it. The R5C would be an ideal camera to rent if you're not sure what you're going to encounter, but you want to make sure you've got photo and video capabilities in one body. The R5C is ideal for that kind of a trip. Then there was a use case that I wasn't even initially didn't spring to mind, but then thinking about it, the R5C is great for internal time-lapse and hyperlapse videos. You can't do that with the C70, but you can get 45 megapixel time-lapse stills and create stunning hyperlapse time-lapse content with the R5C. So that is, again, another great use case for this camera, if that's the type of content you create. A final use case that I think the R5C could be amazing for is special effects and replacing backgrounds or keying or rotoscoping. Having an 8K sensor with all of the data that this can capture in RAW means this camera could be ideal for that type of an output as well, because it gives you so much flexibility to work with in post. So again, R5C, all about options and flexibility. Now let's focus on the C70, which is a camera that's clearly designed with videographers in mind. I just absolutely love the form factor of the C70 when it comes to shooting video. Because it's been designed with one use case in mind, there's just no compromises when it comes to usability. A great example of that is the C70 has built-in ND filters, which is something you get on a cine camera. That's what I expect from a cine camera. The ND filters provide 2, 4, and 6 stops of filtration, but it also has an extended mode in the menu, which combines the 2nd and the 6th filter and the 6th and the 4th filter to give you 8 and 10 stops of filtration if you really need it. It comes with a top handle with a microphone holder on it. It also doesn't slide into the hot shoe. It screws directly into the top of the camera, which is much more secure. The C70 can also be powered by a direct current, which sits next to where its battery ports are. And speaking of batteries, the C70 takes BP8 batteries, which is super big. You can get a 30 or a 60, and you don't have to worry about battery power at all with this camera. It also has a side strap on its grip, which I absolutely love because it makes it super comfortable to hold it all day when I'm walking around and shooting. The C70 has a whole suite of inputs as well. It comes with full-size HDMI, remote, it has time code on it, it has USB-C, it has TRS mic inputs, headphone outputs, and mini XLR jacks as well. So you've got so many options in terms of inputs on the C70, and loads of amazing physical controls as well. Dedicated buttons for white balancing, for peaking, for display, for zebra, for waveforms. You can also set all of these buttons are customizable, all 13 of its buttons. I've got the bottom button at number 12 set to force color, which is really easy to just tap that in, check your exposure. I think that's a really nice way to use those custom buttons. The C70 also has physical controls for audio, so you can control both channels of its XLR inputs on the back of the camera, just under the flip out screen. The C70 shoots up to 4K 120p footage. It can also now do internal RAW recording thanks to a free update provided by Canon for this camera. They can both now record RAW video internally. In terms of footage that you get out of the C70's Super 35 dual gain output sensor, it's super filmic, it's not overly sharp. It looks cinematic straight out of the camera, but you can also record in C-Log 2, which you cannot do with the R5C, and that will give you up to 16 stops of dynamic range. The C70 has a focal plane pin, and you don't have on the R5C, but that is a nice little nod to what this camera is designed for. Now, I mentioned that the C70 was designed to be used without a cage. You don't need to rig it up extra. You've got everything you need in this body. An interesting sign of that is on the grip hand side, you've got a secondary base plate with a 3/4 inch thread, so you can mount the camera sideways. So for example, if you were shooting portrait content for social media, I think that's a really cool way to make the camera even more flexible. And you've got things like tally lights on the front of both cameras, which show you when the cameras are in operation. So who would hire the C70? It's an important thing to note at this point that the C70 is certified with Netflix. This is a great camera to start with if you're taking that next step into working with cine cameras. While the R5C was all about flexibility and options and maybe being able to respond to unexpected situations where you want to take pictures and video, the C70 is a very different prospect. This is a workhorse of a video camera. It's very intentional. You hire this camera when you know what you want to shoot. I would say that the C70 is aimed at skilled solo shooters or people that have a production with those larger cine cameras that want something a bit more flexible for those handheld, those street scenes, or an unintimidating documentary scenario where you're interviewing people, for example. This is a great camera for that kind of a setup. Whichever way you go with these cameras, whether you go for the R5C or the C70, you're not going to be disappointed. Both cameras can produce incredible footage, and in the case of the R5C, amazing stills and time-lapse, hyperlapse type content as well. I think it's about picking the right camera for your specific needs, and I hope I've helped you in making that decision. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the section below. And in the meantime, like and subscribe to this channel, and we'll try our best to keep making content that is as helpful as possible to you guys. Thanks for watching.